Hi, and welcome to another edition of my speculative short fiction roundup. This one is for February 2020, and it includes 16 of the many fabulous stories I read this past month. And I'm kicking right off with Hunt by Mina Lee in Translunar Traveler's Lounge. Mina Lee braids together several different strands into a fierce and ferocious fantasy tale. Princess Severna was married to Crown Prince Yorist at a young age, and for a while he seemed to be a loving husband, but she soon realized the prince was not at all the man he seemed to be, and she found herself trapped in an emotionally abusive marriage. Now Yorist has disappeared on a quest to seek out the magical and mysterious Kingmaker, and Severna the same quest in order to claim the throne herself. This is a compelling, hard-hitting story that pulls no punches, and I really mean that. And the ending? Well, it is delicious. I guess a content warning for some cannibal content might be in order. Next up is Kiki Hernandez Beats the Devil by Samantha Mills, also from Translunar Traveler's Lounge. Kiki Hernandez is the rock legend of the Southwest, and she wields a guitar called Mona Lisa, a fine-tuned, devil-killing music monster. And Kiki plays old rock and roll tunes by Slash and Jimi Hendrix, among others, to defeat her devilish enemies. Her pet is a hellhound called Ozzy, with curling horns for ears and deep pits of flame for eyes, and he can swallow devils in 2 bites apiece. Oh, and did I mention this is a rollicking, rousing, rambunctious tale that you won't soon forget? Samantha Mills has serious storytelling chops, and her talents are on full display in this wonderful story. Next up is A Hench Helps Her Villain No Matter What by Izzy Wasserstein in Escape Pod. Wasserstein puts some excellent, both kinky and hilarious tweaks and twists into the supervillain versus superhero genre in this fantastic story for Escape Pod. Hench is the loyal and mostly obedient henchwoman of supervillain Night Mistress, who is currently battling it out with goody-goody superhero Patriotess. But being a loyal henchwoman doesn't always give you what you want from your villain, and when Hench ends up in a tight spot with Patriotess, she has a fight on her hands, and eventually a radical decision to make. A cheeky and subversively funny story that also includes the excellent quote, "If the universe has a consciousness, it's a bastard. If it has a sense of humor, it's a cruel one." I'm sorry, my dog just entered the room here. So if there's any sounds, that's the dog. Next up is Ngozi Ugegbe Nwa by Dare Segun Falowo in the Dark. And I'm starting with a quote from the story. Quote, "The object that had flashed gold swims past her. It is a mirror, a perfectly gilded pool of oval glass. The person who carries it bends under its weight. Usually, hawkers will carry more than one item of the goods they sell in elaborate strings and belts all around their bodies, but this one is carrying just this one object, the most perfect mirror Ngozi had ever set eyes on." Ngozi buys a beautiful mirror, and once she has it in her home, things rapidly spin ever deeper into madness and horror. I love the twisted and nightmarish sense of terror and obsession that infuse this tale, and the sense that there really truly are some things you cannot escape once you've taken the first wrong step. Vividly imagined and riveting from beginning to end. Next up is How We Burn by Brenda Peinado in Lightspeed. In a future where humanity has come to the brink of what's sustainable to continue living on the planet, A group of humans have created a seemingly safe utopia for themselves. Their children are engineered from before birth using the genetic material of several parents to avoid as many diseases as possible. In society, all possible precautions have been taken to keep these children safe from harm. But safety is not what the teens Sequoia, Tiger, Grizzly Bear, and Joshua Tree crave. They crave thrills and danger, a future where they are not coddled, and they get their kicks using drugs, hacking computer systems, and stealing spaceships, flying too fast, and dreaming of an escape from their safe existence. I love how this story imagines the clash between generations as something complex and fraught, rather than a black and white binary situation. It's a wrenching story packed with both emotion and action, and it doesn't offer easy answers or clear-cut solutions. My next pick is The Oldest Solution by Priya Sridhar in Strange Horizons. Sridhar imagines the cosmic beings known as the Old Ones in a wonderfully original way in the story. Nisha in the story is going to see Dr. Olk to find a way to deal with her anxieties and commitment issues. Dr. Olk is an old one, and in the story, one possible treatment for various human problems, including the issues Nisha is struggling with, is to allow an old one to possess you. This is a lovely and darkly humorous tale with a dizzying cosmic horror perspective. My next pick is Things Boys Do by Pemi Aguda in Nightmare. I've actually read two fabulous horror stories by Pemi Aguda this past month. First, this downright bone-chilling tale of childbirth, revenge beyond the grave, and deeply troubling family relationships in Nightmare. And secondly, Aguda's equally harrowing and haunting story, Manifest, in Granta. Both stories touch on the idea of reincarnation and evil passed down to another generation, and both involve children. Neither story is a light read. In fact, they are violent and bloody and disturbing. And both stories also have a visceral, raw edge to them that makes the horror cut deep. My next story pick is The Last Woman on Earth by Caroline Hadilaksono in Electric Literature. This is the first time I've picked a graphic narrative, aka an illustrated short story, for my short story roundups. A small family is scratching out a living on a future Earth where most humans have already left the fading, dying planet. They have one ticket that would allow one of them passage off the planet, but they don't want to break up the family. Years pass, and eventually a difficult decision is made. This story is told with a subtle and quiet simplicity, yes, yet it is also very heavy with emotion and power. My next story is White Noon by Aidan Doyle in Podcastle. Doyle's story might best be described as a kind of snow-covered, weird western. Three sisters meet up after their mother, a warden, has disappeared and presumably died in the land's deepest dreamstone mine, a place called Old Man's Dream. Two of the sisters, Inga and Kristen, want the third sister, Elin, to choose which one of them should inherit their mother's warden guns, a set of weapons that only work in pairs. It's the start of a mighty adventure, which includes a ride on the troll train, thunder guns, and a belt buckle made in the shape of a dog's face and containing a fragment of light and dark. It's a fabulously entertaining ride and highly recommended. My next story pick is You Can Check Out Anytime You Like by Rhonda Eikamp in Apparition Lit. And it starts with this opening line: "The patient has forgotten what's wrong with her." It's the opening line of a surreal and soul-wrenching story about a patient who is suffering from a condition that neither she nor the various doctors treating her seem able to name or diagnose or treat accurately. She's subjected to several outlandish treatments, but nothing works, and in the end, she always finds herself back in the hospital bed. Reality itself seems to bend and shift around her, as if there are many versions of her or of her world, But in none of these realities can she find release. It's a strange and haunting story that will stick with me for a long time. My next story pick is John Simnel's First Goshawk by Tegan Moore in Beneath Ceaseless Skies. And I'm starting with a quote from the story. Quote, "The hawk has run out of foul names to spit at me. He does not blink, and so I try not to blink. The sallow light is golden in his livid golden eye. One of us will break, and the other triumph, though in the muffled dark of my room I wonder if I might instead go mad." "Or perhaps you're mad already," the goshawk suggests. End quote. So John Simnel was a pretender to the throne of England in the 15th century. The history about him sounds absolutely fascinating. And here, Simnel's work as a falconer intertwines with his thoughts about his own part in the rebellion against the English king and how he was used and tamed to play his part. It's an incisive and heartrending story about a man who is trying to come to terms with himself and the world. Moore's prose is evocative and sharp as a claw. My next story pick is also from Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and it is The Mermaid Astronaut by Yoon-Ha Lee. I do love a good fairy tale retelling, and in this rich and uniquely imagined story, author Yoon-Ha Lee puts a terrific sci-fi twist on the Little Mermaid. As the story explains, this particular mermaid had named herself Esarala, which means seeks the stars in the language of tide and foam. When a trading spaceship lands on Esarala's planet, she seizes the opportunity to go where few mermaids have gone before. What follows is a fantastic science fantasy space adventure, full of aliens, space travel, and, of course, the need to strike a deal with a witch in order for Esarala to get her legs. The price she must pay for that turns out to be somewhat different than she at first imagined. This story is part of a fantastic science fantasy issue of Beneath Ceaseless Skies. My next story pick is I'm Coming With You by P.K. Torrance in Kasma SF. Roberta Banda and Walu Mambwe are the first two people exploring an exoplanet. But what they find on the surface is nothing like what they expected or what their sensors seemed to show them before they landed. Quote, "The landscape twisted out of shape, ripples of leaves, petals, and streams replaced by chunky heat-emitting pipes crisscrossed beneath her feet in layers upon layers. What she thought had been soil was in fact a network of dense and long pipes covered in vegetation." End quote. It's the setup for a harrowing science fiction story that bends closer to horror as Roberta explores the exoplanet further. A fantastic and memorable read. My next story pick is Saint Valentine, Saint Abigail, Saint Bridget by C.L. Polk at Tor.com. And I start with a story quote. Quote, "I was somebody's firstborn child, the price somebody paid for gold and a spotlight. I was made to be given away to a woman with the wisdom of the bees. Mama sends me to school with perfect braids plaited up tight, buys me new clothes each spring and each fall, and though she wards me against sickness, accident, or ill wish, she doesn't love me. No one has ever loved me, not for my whole life." Teresa grows up in the house of the feared rich local witch Miss Labielle, who has raised her as her own daughter. She grows up in a beautiful house with a chauffeur driving her to school and learning witchcraft. But while her life is rich in some ways, she has no friends until she meets Lucille at school, and they form a bond that binds them in more ways than one. Other than Lucille, Teresa only has Mama's bees to confide in, and while the bees may listen and even give you what your heart desires, that magic comes with a price. This is a rich and luminous tale about friendship and love, and about how a person might be willing to pay whatever's necessary to keep the one you love safe. My next story pick is Even Robots Can Cry by Sam Kyung-Yu in Fireside. Simon is studying at university. He is consumed and overwhelmed by the workload, by his family's expectations, by the need to be perfect, and the pressure to live up to the image his parents have of what his life ought to be. Quote, not wanting to do something is not a legitimate reason not to do it. He can do it, and that's all that matters. This is how the world functions. Life isn't about doing or getting what you want. End quote. Simon is also haunted by thoughts of his sister, the person who walked away from all expectations and family obligations, leaving Simon behind to carry all this weight by himself. I felt this story in my very bones. It expertly captures the claustrophobic feeling of anxiety and mute desperation, that feeling of being trapped in a situation you cannot escape. My final story pick this month is We Are the More by Sylvia Heike in Flash Fiction Online. And I start with a story quote. Quote, we are one and we are many. We are shrubby willow and cotton grass. We are moss and heather. All we need is this peaceful state of being. Enjoy the sun, listen to the birds, drink the mist. But there's a new voice among us, and she won't let us rest. Night and day she whispers about a man in town. The moor itself speaks to us in this lovely, haunting love and ghost story by Sylvia Heike. Here, the moor is the plants and the ground and the souls that have gone into the moor's roots and stems and moss through the years, retaining sentience even though they've changed in the process. When a new woman becomes part of the moor, she resists the pull of it at first. An old love draws her back to where she lived and died, and where the man she loved still resides. A gorgeous and moving story. And that's it for this month. All of my new monthly roundups are available at curiousfictions.com, and you can read them there. And there will be another roundup next month. Thank you so much for listening.